Okay, so welcome everyone to the first in what we hope will be a series of webinars for local government. This one is on footpath design, so it's also cycleways or general sidewalks. It's one of many topics which we'll explain, and what we will emphasize throughout this session is that we want to get feedback because we can do a huge amount of other areas for local government. So as we go through this, please type in questions. We've got quite a few staff from Bricsys online that can answer your questions straight away. If we can't, we'll get back to you very, very soon with more dialogue. So let's just look at the agenda. Ava's going to work through the slides for us here. So we'll do a brief introduction just to explain what we understand as government, and it's different in every area. So we've got attendees here from all across APAC. I'm based in Australia, but we do have people from as far away as India and all around Asia as well. So we will explain our interpretation of local government. We'll do a demo of a really basic footpath, and we want to cater for scenarios where a quick job needs to go out the door just to show some basic concepts. We'll discuss that and we'll ask you for some feedback, doing some polls. Then we'll show you a second job of a more complete documentation, and then we'll do a brief summary afterwards. On that summary, we will ask you for feedback for the next webinars. So please type it in whenever you want, of course, in the questions, or hang on for the poll, please, as well, and give us some direct feedback. So let's just introduce ourselves here. On the next slide, we can see my name is Sean Toomey. I'm based in Sydney, and I've got a background for 25 plus years in the world of civil engineering, consulting, BIM and GIS. I've worked for CAD resellers for quite a few years, so I've done quite a few of these presentations. I'm joined by Ava today, who's also a solutions consultant. She's based in Singapore, and she's got more of a background in construction and quantity surveying, as well as geotech. So it's good to have complementary skills. We're both involved in the general tech team. Ava focuses heavily on the training guides and general tech presentations. So again, as we go through this, give us all the feedback you can think of. So in terms of Bricsys in general, we've got a slide here which just shows we are a global company. And we're part of Hexagon, which we often forget to emphasize. So we do CAD, BIM, mechanical, and common data environment packages. Our HQ is in Belgium. We just had our conference there last week or 2 weeks ago. And we got regional headquarters throughout the globe. So Singapore is the HQ for APAC. So we all report into there and work as an extended team through that process. So in terms of the products that we offer, there are multiple versions of BricsCAD. I often forget to emphasize which version we're working on at one time. So Light is for doing 2D CAD, which we're all very familiar with. Pro, which is the one we'll focus on most today, does all the 2D work, but also a 3D, but it has civil and GIS tools. So Ava will show us some of the GIS functionality. We won't get a chance to go into the civil tools today, but we will roughly explain what they do and be very, very happy to get some feedback afterwards if you want more information. The BIM product is obviously for building design. We've got some very impressive point cloud functionality across all of this. We are aware that local government for councils also includes buildings as well as roads and everything else. So while today's is focused on roads, we can do a building and in particular scanning building side in the future as well. And then mechanical is obviously very focused on sheet metal and assembly design, etc. So with that in mind, let's talk about local government and what it means. So as I said, I'm based in Australia, so I work most closely with Australia and New Zealand, but I'm very aware of the fact that we've got a very broad audience today. So even within Australia and New Zealand, there's some significant differences. We've got district councils and city councils in New Zealand, but under local government, it also includes regional authorities who manage various things such as, water networks and general services. Whereas in Australia, so we've got a slide here which shows that the government is divided into federal, state, and local. So local government doesn't include state policies. So of these diagrams, in Australia, things like utilities, like water provision, that is done through state government, not local government. So we're not going to have a perfect formula to cater for everyone's government needs. What we're doing really is just showing the concepts. So what we're doing today will be one of the more basic ones. We're happy to go and do a whole session on water because we do have a very extensive GIS platform. So we'll get to the opportunity to discuss those and provide that feedback. So moving on, what we're talking about really is councils, which are the guys who take care of everything from, as you see, health services. We've all had immunization recently from COVID, as well as cultural facilities and community services. So what we're showing in terms of the actual road design is one part of what the councils do. So we're very aware of that. We're also very aware of the fact that the mechanical and BIM products are also relevant in here. We tend to focus on the general 2D CAD side quite a lot, but we're very, very keen to extend that. Today's session in this interpretation of local government is in the infrastructure and property services area, which tends to be usually focused on roads. Councils are often referred to as the 3 R's. So there's roads, rates, and rubbish. So councils take rubbish away from houses, they build roads, and they charge residents rates and fees to achieve those. So footpaths are obviously one part of the road. So knowing that, what we can do is consider where BricsCAD fits in to council usage. So on the next slide here, we will see the council departments can vary depending on the size of the council. So for example, in Australia, we have some very large councils in the built-up areas, but being a very large landmass with a small population, we also have some very, very small councils. So they wouldn't have as many departments as this, but they can include these and a lot more. So the roads is the most obvious one, but the bioretention for managing water spill-offs, as well as asset management is a huge part, traffic, etc. And we play in all these areas, which we could go through in detail, but today I want just to mention that and then talk about what we do with those. We also want to distinguish between design and documentation. So for example, on this PowerPoint here, we're highlighting the cycle symbol on the road, as well as the pole for the stop sign, the gully pit for drainage, the curb, and the trash can for the assets. These are obviously physical items. When you build a 3D model, they don't tend to get documented on that 3D model. It's documents on the 2D plan. So if we go to the next part of the slide, we will see the same information in a 3D format, but all the documentation is obviously in the 2D plan. So the standard 2D CAD tools tend to be a very important part of this. So we'll do a demo in a while to show that. But just to position where BricsCAD fits into all this, the general usage of BricsCAD, or CAD in general, tends to be based off some very basic features. So we got probably the 5 most popular things for standard usage for doing this documentation are blocks, line types, multi-leaders, and used through tool palettes, which Ava will show. And obviously using things like snapping tools and polygons, etc. But the general fundamentals tend to work through these. So let's just quickly mention those. I don't want to spend too much time on the PowerPoint. But if you think about line types and layers, so we've got a slide here which will show how we use those. So these behave exactly as you'd expect in the CAD platform. And what we're just showing here are different line types and colors for different services. So you got electricity, you got sewer, you got water, etc., all shown up as defined in these layers and line types. We often get asked the question of how we manage existing CAD standards. So if you've got other CAD platforms, we read DWG natively and we write DWG natively. So the existing standards port across. So we can do a separate session. We've done a few of these on how you work with those existing standards. But let's just first of all mention the fact that we can do those. And again, if you want more information, please leave us know. In terms of blocks, we've got a few examples on the next slide. So you've got a standard detail here from a bioretention. We also have a traffic intersection here just showing basic blocks for giveaway signs. So the standard road signs and everything else work. These are obviously going to be different in each location, but the concept of using CAD blocks is obviously very native to us. We, as I mentioned earlier, read those files in natively, so existing block libraries can be imported directly, or sorry, read directly, not even imported. The next thing we mentioned from those are leaders. So leaders are obviously a huge part of the documentation process, and things like multi-leaders with annotative text and all the various parameters around that are a very important part. So we show those and how easy they are to use. What we find is that sometimes non-CAD specialists want to do a basic site plan or a general layout. So the fact that the tools are easy to use and intuitive makes a big difference for that, because people tend to have the knowledge and just think that maybe the CAD platform is a bit too complex if you don't use it every day. So we make sure we build up palettes, which Ava will show in a second, to make that easy. The next thing is hatch patterns. So obviously we do those. This example is a detention pond. So you can see you have the various planting areas being highlighted with various hatch patterns. So we'll go through those a little bit as well. Again, they port across from other platforms and they behave exactly as you would expect. And the last thing we'll mention before we turn over to Ava is that the viewports work. So when it comes to plotting, we could do a whole session on how we manage sheet sets and various types of PCB files, which all come across. But let's just mention here that viewports work as you would expect, and we can easily do various scaling options as well for those. So let's move on to a quick demonstration. Just to frame this, the scenario here is that rather than doing a full CAD output and drawing everything manually, what we're going to do here is take an aerial photograph and just highlight which areas of certain footpaths or cycleways need to be maintained or upgraded or dug up and redone from scratch. So it's a classic scenario where people have got the knowledge in their heads and they need to know how to put this down in a CAD platform. And the reason we're showing this is that we've seen people go to Google Earth imagery and take screen captures and put it into things like PowerPoint and draw on it there, which is, okay, that works, but it's easier to do it in BricsCAD and more accurate, and you get a better result. So with that, let's ask Ava to take the stage and take us through this presentation.
Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some of you as well. My name is Ava Chuan. I'm part of the APAC pre-sales technical team, and today we'll take a look at how you can easily do your labels and hatch patterns in BricsCAD. As we all know, there's a lot you can do with CAD, and the possibilities are endless. It can cater to the occasional users who only need basic tools, and of course, our super users who probably know CAD like the back of their hand. Our goal today is to show you that you do not need to be an expert to use BricsCAD. CAD does not have to be intimidating. Rather, it can even be a tool that will help you have a great workflow experience. So let's begin. And once you launch BricsCAD, the first thing that you will see is the launcher dialog. This lets you pick from several workspaces. Bricsys has an entire suite of products, like what Sean mentioned, including 2D, 3D, civil, mechanical, and BIM. It is also important to know that everything is in one platform, and the native file format of all these products is DWG. What does this mean? So this simply means that you can open other CAD software drawings and directly work with them. Today's session will be working on BricsCAD Pro, and the Pro level covers 2D drafting, 3D modeling, and civil features. So I want to start with an aerial photograph that I have attached in my drawing using the image attach command. And if we launch this command, let's say bring in this raster image, you can see here that we have a couple of options available, like adding geocoding information to your raster image, or you can also specify your insertion points, your scale, and your rotation. So going back, say you have a GIS data for this area and you want to bring that in for reference. So you can also import your shape files over here. In this case, I have here my road network, so I can just bring that in with just one click, and the data comes in as expected. So when does this become useful, right? So sometimes you also have your utility lines like electricity or telco lines, or maybe even your water lines like what Sean mentioned. So you can also bring in those shape files, and this will be useful for your alignments or your coordination with other departments or your contractors. And if we go to the GIS tab in the Civil Explorer, we can open this roads layer and see a consolidated table of the GIS information that we have. For this one, we have the names, the classification, and the max speed available. If you want to filter this, you are also able to do so in BricsCAD, and you can also stack your filters here as well. It works in an if and an if or function. So this will be quite useful if, let's say, you want to sort through your data. As we all know, perhaps your GIS data can vary information with maybe like 100 or even thousands of data in a single layer. So once we do that, we can easily sort through our data in here as well. So we have here some lot boundaries on some of these areas where the footpath reconstruction will be. And you can further ease your workflow by creating your own customized tool palette in BricsCAD like what I have done here. We can create this according to the usual tools that we will be using for our workflow to make it more accessible for us. We have here some annotation tools, some hatching tools, some drafting tools, which will be very handy in a little bit. And of course, we also have here our scale bars, amongst other things. You can easily add your text, your separators, and create your new palettes, and even customize your palette over here. You can also add your tools from here as well. So if we go to our hatch tool over here and we look at the swatches that we have, maybe let's say I think that the blocks hatches will be quite useful for today's workflow, and then I can just easily add that into my current tool palette. And you see that it is now added here, and I can just drag that in here together with the hatches, all my other hatch patterns. And because we have GIS data attached to our data, when we click on any of these lines and go to our properties panel, we can see the GIS data attached to it. From here, we can easily identify what street we are working on and add in the corresponding labels for our sketch plan. So for example, for this one, we can see that this is 2nd Street, and here we have 10th Avenue. So we can proceed to add in our labels with our text. So in this case, we know that this is 2nd Street. So we will just label this accordingly. I'll add in 2nd Street over here. And let's try to do another one where we want our text to be parallel with the street. For example, for this one, I'll just specify this as my rotation angle and then proceed to type in my label as well. So let's first turn off the visibility of our GIS layer first so we can focus more on the detailing of our footpath. So now let's check on our layers to make sure that we are drafting on the correct layer so that we can easily sort out our elements. I will use pathway as my layer and proceed to do all my details here. Of course, if you want to add a new layer, you can also do that in this panel. Now we can use the lot boundary as our guide for the end of the private property and the start of our footpath. So depending on where you are across the world, the minimum width of a footpath can vary from around minimum 1 or 1.2 meters to 3 meters or more, especially if there is also a cycling path provision. Assuming that for this street, the design states that the footpath shall be 2.4 meters. So we will do an offset of the lot boundary of that much. So I'll just do that as well on these sides as well. And since we see that this is probably a primary road, perhaps this might have a footpath that is wider, maybe around 3.5 meters. So let me just do that again here and once again here. So let's connect these corners and make it rounded using the fillet tool. Just select these two and do that once again to the other 3 corners that I have over here. Again, I will use the lot boundaries as our guide, and we can use the extend command to extend these lines as our basis. Notice that as I hover over the line that I intend to extend, a blue line comes up as a preview, so we will have an idea of how it will appear. So similarly, if I want to use the trim command and want to trim any of these lines, this blue line will also come up once again, giving me a preview of how this will look like, or highlight the element or the area that will be trimmed. So let me just do an offset for this side, because perhaps maybe we have an existing verge that we want to retain over here. I can just do that and use these lines again as my guidelines for my extension. I can do this one by one, or I can also select these to make it faster. And if I want to extend this further, I can also do that simply by just using my tool palette over here. All right, so before we start with the hatch pattern and labels, let's take a quick look at this legend that I have over here. So as you can see, these hatches will probably be used the most in our workflow, and we have added these hatch patterns over here in our tool palette, rightfully so. So I will add in some lines as my markers, especially on some of these driveways that would not be included in the reconstruction. So I'll just add some lines over here. And I don't have to worry about making sure that these lines will be perfect, or I will be able to close these lines perfectly. Because we have drawing optimization tools in BricsCAD, like the Optimize tool, this can take care of my open gaps or some other skewed lines, or depending on what imperfections that you have in your drawing. It can easily identify the gaps or misalignments based on the tolerance level that you specify, and this will help us rectify these things. As you can see, based on my tolerance level, it can see that 17 gaps will be closed, and this will highlight the items that will be closed as well for easier identification. So once I hit apply, you can see that there are 17 gaps that have been closed now. So let's say that based on the discussions that we've had with other departments, it has been agreed that these areas will be an F1 path, so we can go ahead and add that hatch pattern in. Just easily select these, and we can easily add in our hatch patterns here as well. So for this side, since this is an existing verge, I would want to trim some of these items as well. So if I want to trim some of these, I can easily do so, and then proceed to add in my hatches as well. So let's say for this side, some of these areas will be an F2 path, and some will be an F1 path. So I can just easily do that in BricsCAD, and it's very accessible. I no longer have to go through my the hatch command, since all my tools are already in my tool palette. So we have, as you can see, there's a number of existing trees that we have here, and we need to determine which ones are to be retained, removed, or any proposed alterations to be done. So we can start with the proposed tree pit for existing trees. And if you notice, the boundaries that we have here are not really parallel to the X and Y axis. So we can use dynamic UCS and lock that in to make sure that our tree pit is aligned with the boundaries. So using the dynamic inputs, we can also input the dimensions or the areas of the tree pit that we have. So let's say we know that this tree pit will be about 3.5 meters by 1 meter. So we can just add that in here. So let's try to do another one on this side. Again, locking in the dynamic input. So maybe we have a tree pit that might be a bit shorter, 2 by 1 meter. So we can just add that in. And at any point, if you want to do quick checks to see if the tree pit is spaced correctly from the edge of our footpath, let's say I want it to be just 0.1 meter away, I can just type that in, and BricsCAD will intelligently move our element over to 0.1 meter away from the edge of our footpath. So then we can also mark the trees to be retained. And of course, in cases where you got approval of the tree removal, you would also want to reflect that in your plan. So let's say I want to mark the ones to be retained in green, let's say here. And I want to mark the ones to be removed in red. Maybe we have 2 over here. So now, since these are not reflected in our legend, we can add labels to help avoid confusion. Of course, the last thing that we want to do is to remove trees that were actually meant to be there in the first place. I'm sure that Mother Nature would not approve that. So let's add in our labels. Maybe we can say existing tree to be retained. And perhaps for this side, we can add in existing tree for removal. To minimize our labels, I will just add in a leader for this side to help make it look a lot more organized and clean. So let's wrap up our plan by adding some dimensions and annotations. I can add in identification here to show that this is an existing verge that will be retained. And they can add in their landscaping as required. Now we can also add in our dimensions. And at any point, if you want to change your dimension styles, you can easily do that in BricsCAD as well. So let's say for here, I want to use this dimension style. And if I want to change this, I can just go to my status bar and change my dimension as well. So let's try it out. So let's say, let's add in this for here. Linear dimension. And if we want to add in more, we can also easily do that in here as well. So if we want to move this around, we can easily do that. And it's very, very accessible and user-friendly. So let's try to add in some more dimensions on the other side, just to help us with identification. Lastly, let's add in our true north for reference. So once we are done, we can move on to the paper space. And as you can see, we have our title block here. And what we would want to do is to create a viewport. You have various options in viewport creation, like the usual standard rectangular ones, or if you need to create 2, 3, or 4 viewports. In this case, I want to create a polygonal one so that I can make space for my legend. So let's just do a quick viewport over here. And you can then proceed to zoom into whatever scale that you need. Or you can also go to your properties panel and type in a scale that you want. So let's say for this one, I want to type in my custom scale. So this will be 1:100. Let me do that again. So here, since we have it here now, we can just type in our custom scale. And then we can proceed to just reposition that anywhere that we would prefer this to be. So let me just create another viewport for my legend. So since we know that our scale is 1:100 over here, then we can just easily add in our scale bars, which I have also added in my customized tool palette. So here 1:100, and we can just add that into our drawing. Then if you need to print this as a PDF, or you need to plot this, you can easily do that as well, like how you normally would in your workflow. So let's do a preview of this one. And as you can see here, we have done a sample of how it would look like over here. Of course, if you have your own plotters or your pen assignments or any plotter configuration, you can also use that in BricsCAD and just use it according to how you would or according to your requirement. So this is a quick taste of what you can do or how you can create your labels, your hatch patterns for your plans, like your schematics or your sketch plans here in BricsCAD. So before we move on to the next demo, we would want to have some polls for you guys.
Cool. So thank you, Eva. Super good to see this. I think what's most important part of that presentation is the fact that there's functionality that we know exists that can be put into a tool palette. So the occasional users will have a whole workflow defined for them. So it's a good example of people who don't use CAD very often having a proper environment to let them do what they need. So in terms of the polls, we'd like to just ask you a few quick questions to get an idea of what's happening. So let's start off by getting an idea of how often you use CAD. So let me launch this poll. So if I go and run this poll here, do I have to open it first maybe? Okay, so we can see we got quite a few everyday users, and we got a few rare occasions and a few weekly users. That's cool. That gives us a good idea of what's happening. And look, if anybody has other variations on this, please type them in on the questions tab or the Q&A tab, because we're keen to get as much feedback as possible. So we're also keen to know what functionality you tend to use most often within the CAD platform. So let's run this poll here. I think I can share this as well as we're doing that. So we've written down some basic general areas here. If there's other areas that you use more often, please type those in as well, where we don't want to be limited just by what we put down here. So I see we've got some people clicking on civil design, so we can do a separate session on that. There's quite a few on 2D documentation, which we'd expect. Those tend to be a very important part. It's interesting how the 3D geometry is very, very powerful, but I think most of the standards for civil engineering are still based off 2D, so it makes sense that would be the higher percentage here. Okay, this is really useful. I'll just leave it open for a few more seconds. And then we'll do one more poll just to, again, give us more of a taste of what we're doing here. So we're keen to understand how, well, basically what you do with BricsCAD. So do you currently have a version of it? And if so, which version is it? Or just give us some feedback on your awareness of BricsCAD. So let me see if I can share this. Okay, so we got a few people on V24 and V23. Okay, that's good. We got most people here have got BricsCAD already. And again, by all means, please type in whatever's on your mind in ideally the Q&A tab or else the chat tab so we can get that data going. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of people on V24 and V23. I think the GIS functionality came in on V23. It's being enhanced on V24 and will continue to be enhanced. So we can now edit the schemas and do quite a lot more with it. So let me close this poll and I'll stop sharing. So hopefully I can now share my screen. So let me go to my share screen tab and click on share. Give this a couple of seconds just to link across. What you should now see is a BricsCAD screen. So this job is a slightly more complex version of what Ava was showing, but it's the exact same concept. So you can see what it really is just more leaders, more text, more details, but really the same process. So we're not going to show how we did all this geometry. We're just going to look through it and show some of the highlights. But the point to emphasize is that once it works for the small job, the same process works for a larger job. It's just a question of putting in more information. And the hard part tends to be knowing what to type in on these notes. And we find that people have that expertise already. They just need to know how to access it, hence the whole value of the palettes. We mentioned and we saw people said that they work with civil objects quite a lot. We do have a whole bunch of options for thin surfaces and volume surfaces, etc. We won't show those today, but they are on the Civil Explorer. So leave us know which of those you want to see and we can come back to them. Ava already mentioned and showed how the GIS side works. On this file, I've got some layer groups set up just to show how things work here. So if we look at the strings and services, we can see that the GIS layers have already been imported here. So we have the water layer, the sewer layer, electricity, etc. So these give us exactly what we need. We'll also see that the general layout is a road that's going east-west around in a kind of a U shape. And what we're doing fundamentally is adding a cycle lane onto this. So this is our cycle lane here in yellow, which we'll show in a second. And we do have a whole bunch of annotation, obviously, on this as well. So let's do a few things here that are not in the standard CAD platforms, because what we were showing earlier was how we do things you would expect to see from a CAD platform. But BricsCAD's got a few unique features that I'd like to show in a civil engineering context. So many of you may have seen Blockify and Copy Guided on architectural plans. Let's very quickly run these on the civil engineering scenario. So if I go to the, say, outer strings only layer here, you can see here we've got a series of geometry types that represent a power pole, but they've been exploded or it's been scanned from a PDF, and it's all individual lines. So if we were to upload this to a theodolite, it would be quite difficult to work with. What we can do is type in Blockify. And what this will do is allow us to select the geometry, and it's going to find all instances of that geometry around the drawing and convert them into blocks. So I will untick these options so I can type in my own insertion point, my own block name. When I press enter, I get prompted for my insertion point, which I click on here. And from my, I'll say search the entire drawing. And the block name I'll use, I'll call it electricity pole 1. So what we see now is the green tick mark on all the instances of that geometry around this drawing. So I could go anywhere I wanted here and say untick one that wasn't relevant, but you can see how easy it is to now convert all those into blocks. So if I was now to upload this to a theodolite, these will come across as a single point, which is exactly what surveyors want. So that's probably one of the more underutilized functions in BricsCAD. We got quite a few variations on it, and you can see on that panel, as well as the standard functions for typing in the geometry types, there's also what I call a tolerance factor or a fuzz factor, so that if it's been scanned from a PDF and we need to give it some tolerance, we can allow that, because the PDF scans aren't always completely accurate. So that's one of our favorite functions to show. The other one is copy guided. So let's just switch to the cycle lane only. And it's sometimes easier to show this on basic geometry. So if this line here was the center line of our road, we want to copy a block or some text along that. If we run copy guided, and if I select here, I'll select carefully so that my item shows up in yellow and my reference object is in blue. So now when I copy here, you will see that as I move around the curve of that road, it is automatically placing the object at 90 degrees. So I can put it left or right. And as I do this, I can then go and change the distances too. So if I select my road first and then my object, I can change the offset from 1.4 to say 1.8. That's easy to do with standard tools, but it's quite a few clicks. You've got to snap at 90 degrees. You've got to do a whole bunch of easy but repetitive features. And if you're doing these all day long, every day, it's good to have the automated functions. What I'll do next is hold this with a long left click so the manipulator shows up. And now I can drag it along that y-axis. You can see here I can graphically move it at various increments or type in an offset. And what it's doing is just picking that local system for us, so I don't have to do my orthogonal snaps at 90 degrees again. So to run that on the actual real job, if I go here to this situation where we have the bicycle symbol and the arrow, so if I run copy guided here, and let's select again, we'll click on the geometry and we'll see our object, our reference object, which is the center line, is shown up in blue. So now if I move around this curved area here, you will see that we are snapping exactly as we should. So we can very quickly copy items and move them. We find that when people get accustomed to this functionality and they have to move back to a different CAD platform, they don't like it. Because what this is doing is what we sometimes call quality of life improvements, because it makes your job easier for these repetitive tasks that seem simple, but if you're doing hundreds of these every day, it becomes quite cumbersome to do them manually. Now, I think we're quite close to the end of our presentation here, so the end of our time. So let me just quickly show this entire job again, so you can see how much items would have to be copied here over time. So by having these functions and by extending what Ava showed earlier, we can build up this full drawing. I want to make sure we run the last poll. So that was our complete cycleway design. By way of summary here, we did start with the basic scenario, which I think is often the case where people want to just take an aerial photograph and quickly put some hatch patterns and basic dimensions to show a documentation of what needs to happen. And then we show the full documentation version. So, and on the full documentation, we made sure to emphasize the unique features of BricsCAD. So the basics were just 2D and importing standards and GIS. The enhanced version is using the block effect commands, etc. Now, the industry focus areas of doing more on the GIS and more on the civil tools, we can most certainly show you at a separate stage. So we want to just quickly allow some time to give you guys an opportunity to vote for which features we should show on new webinars. So let me stop sharing so I can share this poll. Okay, so we've got people voting for surveying and for CAD user interface customization. We just put down 5 sample topics here. We also have other, so if there's topics that we haven't listed, please type those in. We can't get too much feedback in these scenarios. And as we showed earlier, the amount of areas that we could think of for local government off the tops of our heads, please educate us on what else should be shown. Okay, so there's quite a few votes for survey, which is good. For those on the beta program, the beta of the newest version about to be released of BricsCAD has got some interesting functions for surveying as well. So we look forward to showing those very soon. Okay, so we actually got votes for everything here, including the others. So yeah, please continue to type those in. And any other questions you got as well. So let me quickly go to the Q&A tab here so I can see what's happening. Okay, so we got questions about the legends and paper space. Okay, we want to show about point cloud transparency. We would love to show point clouds, but we can't quite do it in this session. We can do a separate one on those. We got somebody asking about block redefinition. This is an interesting question. We can do this very well. So this is a bit beyond the scope of what we were planning on showing today, but let me just mention it super quickly. In the BricsCAD environment, if you type in Explorer, you will see a full list of all the blocks you've got here. And within this blocks panel, you can do quite a lot to control these. So when you right click, you got all kinds of options. Now we can't show it today, but I want just to mention it because it's a good question. Just be aware of it, and we'll be happy to do a separate one. We got questions about coordinate systems. There's been a few questions about the recording of this session being available, so this will certainly be uploaded. Let's see what else we got. Okay, those are the main questions. Again, please type these in, and if we don't get them today, we will most certainly get back to you very soon. Okay, there's another question about transferring blocks from one drawing to another. So it's the same answer as previous. So let me just type in the Explorer command again. So if I had multiple drawings open here, actually let me just make a new file so it's very obvious. So let's go here and make a new empty file. So we've got 2 drawings open here. Now if I type in Explorer, I can go to my existing file and grab whatever I want from here. So I've got all these blocks, for example. I can drag all these across into my current drawing. So you can easily customize templates and do a huge amount with these. So we could do several sessions on the Drawing Explorer by itself. In general, what I find is once you open it, it's quite easy to navigate. You can find all your dimension styles, your table styles, etc. So I think Ava customized a few dimension styles earlier. So if you had, say, MC100 here that we wanted to copy, we could then bring that into our new file. You can also build templates for these or even rename them. The other point to quickly mention is on the structure browser here, you'll see a hierarchy of everything in this drawing. So if I wanted to, for example, turn off all my blocks and they weren't all on individual layers, I can highlight first of all my blocks here. Then I could right click and say hide all these. Or do the opposite. I'll show all these. I'll right click and isolate them. So when we get files that need to be tidied up, we often use this process to automate it. So let's do one more example of that. Let's turn everything back on. I will select this block here, the one we just made earlier. When I select it, we jump to that in the browser, or sorry, the hierarchy. I can now right click those electricity blocks and select isolate. So now we just see those electricity blocks we made earlier. So from the questions, it seems like there's people who do quite a bit of work with blocks. And I think when you get drawings from external sources or that have been exported by other packages, you often need to do some tidy up. So we can do a separate session on this, because on the support side, whenever we get questions about drawings that are too big or not working properly, it's the Explorer and this hierarchy function that we tend to use to go through them. Okay, we got a few questions on multi-leaders too. So yeah, it's the same process as doing normal leaders. We can just attach multiple arrows to them to generate those. We do a very comprehensive guide on how you migrate existing CAD standards into BricsCAD as well. So a bunch of things will appear natively, and there's a few renaming basic parameters and very, very doable things that need to get done. So we've got existing webinars on those. So if you go, if you search on our website for migration guides, you'll find all those. We can send you the links too. So yeah, please do us now. Okay, so there's questions about putting the legend in paper space and model space. That's a personal preference. We find some people like to do either or. I would probably put them in paper space myself, but yeah, a lot of folks do like to use the viewports like Ava showed as well. So there's questions about cross sections. So we don't have cross sections yet, but we will happily do a session on what we do in civil. A lot of it's focused on thin surfaces and volume controls. So we've got questions about page setups, which we import. So if you've got a PCP file and your CTB color assignments already defined, we can import all those. So we've got questions about line types. So we can import the LIN files. So what you tend to have to do is, if you're on AutoCAD, for example, you've got an acad.lin file, that gets renamed to default.lin, and then we just place it in the right folder and it works. Okay, so people are asking about complete settings from one machine to another. I think this may be about deployments. So we can build a full ARG profile. So once you've set up one instance of BricsCAD exactly as you need, you can build a profile and put that into an ARG file and make that part of your deployment. So you could just copy them manually if it's only a few machines. If it's a large setup and you want to actually deploy it through IT, you can entirely customize the whole thing. We can also network these. So we can have, say, 5 licenses on a server and have, say, 20 people accessing those 5 licenses. And you can customize which version of the software they get as well. If you've got, say, the BIM Pro and Mechanical all installed, you can specify which users or which IP addresses get access to which version. I've been asked, could I demonstrate that? I won't have time just now. I think the session is finishing in 5 minutes, but we can do a separate session on that very happily. So we can send you some links to existing webinars, or we can do a separate demo for you or an overall presentation. So it's good to get that feedback because we often show the colorful, flamboyant type commands, and we don't think about the practicality of things like deployments. So just to be clear, you're asking about the deploying the software or copying settings from two local machines? Okay, we got a question saying, are there presentation videos available for processing topo data? I will check. We certainly do plenty of demos ourselves. There should be something on YouTube for that, but if not, we'll do either a presentation for you directly or a webinar. That's one of our strongest features in the civil side, so we quite like presenting it. We also do volume calculations, and we show cut fill contours and various other documentations to show how the volumes are calculated. Okay, so it's copying settings from two machines. Look, I want time to go through it properly here, but when you go to the profiles command, so I'll type in profiles. We've got a profile manager here, V24 profile manager. Okay, it's on a different screen here. Let me just drag it across. You can see how these profiles get set up here. So if I was to make a new one and call it webinar, then go and export that and import it to a new machine. Now it will need more files as well. It's not just a profile file, but you can easily compact those and transfer them across different machines. So I won't do it now because we've only got 2 minutes before this session finishes, but we can certainly take that on board. So I think we may be about to finish up here. So thank you guys for attending. It's great to see so many questions. And we will look at all the responses, in particular, the suggestions for future webinars. And if you think of more in the meantime, please email us as well. We're always happy to extend these and do more. And also thank you, Ava, for all the hard work in getting all that details worked out for the technical side.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you everyone for tuning into our webinar. We hope that you will watch our next webinars, hopefully based on what your feedback to us are.